Today, I'm joined by someone whose leadership spans classrooms, communities, and even global outreach. Nicola Myers Gardere is the district hearing officer at a large school district in Central Texas. She's an educator, author, advocate, and someone who believes in raising resilience and building people up. Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let's just start with your story. When you look back, what pulled you toward leadership in education?
So for me, leadership in education actually grew out of lived experiences and, of course, formal training. So growing up in a family where resilience and responsibility and service was deeply rooted in our family, it sort of pulled me into that leadership role because it was all around me. And so I was seeing children in the neighborhood or students even being disciplined more than they were being developed. And so for me, that was a call to action. I realized that influence creates access. And of course, access is what changes lives, right? So for me, my goal was always to humanize the system that most people don't see the human element to. And that humanization actually starts shifting outcomes and use education for me, using education leadership to break the cycles and to create opportunities for children across the globe, not just here in Central Texas. And so for me, it was just looking at, what can I do to create an impact or to have a lasting impact in the lives of our children? And it was the humble beginnings that really started shaping who I have become and what my story is really about.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And I know when we met a couple of years ago, we spoke a lot about restorative practices and building people up in their future. So to you, how do you define leadership?
So for me, I define leadership as a responsibility actually to build people. So it's not all about the titles. The titles are going to be there regardless, but what do you do under that umbrella of the title that has been created, right? So it's about impact, the impact that you create. It's showing up with resilience, lifting others, and using influence to open doors and repair what's broken, whether it's in the school or in the homes, and just making communities stronger. And so as a former high school and alternative school principal, and now a district hearing officer, it's kind of interesting how those all go together. I've seen how decisions at every single level that I've been involved in actually impact lives. And so as a senior fellow also with the Texas Policy Institute, I work alongside senators. And so I'm oftentimes testifying on legislation that affects our communities. And I mean communities to include our school community and the community in which we live. And so out of that interaction, I was able to testify on 2 bills that were actually signed into law. So for me, leadership is service and action. We just don't talk about it, right? So you actually have to put action behind what you're doing. So it's service and action. And when you get an opportunity to align policy and practice, accountability shows up, right? And so you ensure the work that I'm doing creates stronger futures for tomorrow. It's all about taking care of the children and making sure that I'm holding myself accountable for the outcomes. So that's really in a nutshell.
Yeah, and you mentioned service and action, and I think that really goes a long way too, because you can say all of these things about leadership, you can talk about leadership, but if you're not actually putting in the work and putting in the action, to help the kids, it's just talking.
You just work. Yeah. You're just talking and moving. You're just talking and
Absolutely.
moving. And so there's no real lasting impact at all.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us into our next question. What values specifically
Mhm.
anchor the way you show up as a leader, especially in places or communities that need a lot of healing or rebuilding?
Yes, and that is something that I see on a regular basis nowadays. What's going on globally, not just here again in Central Texas or in America. So the core values, I look at core values that anchor how I show up as a leader: resilience, service, equity, and just restorative action. You talked earlier about not just saying what you're doing, but showing what you're doing. And so for me, I kind of anchor myself in those core values. I believe that in spaces that need healing or rebuilding, leaders must prioritize accountability. They must prioritize empathy. They must prioritize relationships. So throughout my career as a teacher, principal, district hearing officer, senior fellow in the Texas Policy Institute, and through my foundation, I've worked to restore trust. That's one thing that we must keep at the forefront, restoring trust, making sure that whatever you're doing, you're creating equitable systems, and you're also elevating voices that are typically unheard. And that's one of my favorite zones to stay in, because sometimes if individuals feel no one is listening, what I have to say is not important, and then they just become silent. And so whatever they have within them stays there, and it doesn't come out. So for me, it's all about elevating the voices that are often unheard, whether it's implementing restorative disciplines, guiding legislation that impact our communities, or even supporting campus administrators, teachers, students through transitions that are challenging. Because a lot of times we forget that when the challenge shows up, we're not the only ones that's feeling that impact. So it's just grounding myself in the belief that everyone has the capacity to grow and to contribute to society. A lot of times we forget that the ones that are often forgotten and the ones that are silenced actually carries gifts within them that you have to be able to pull out and allow them to contribute positively to society. With my core values that, at the heart of it, I show up to build people. The bottom line, I show up to build people, strengthen resilience, and also creating opportunities for lasting systemic change. Earlier, we talked about creating impact, right? But we're not looking at systemic change that's going to be lasting, because true leaders empower people. True leaders empower. And so this is how I show up as a leader.
Absolutely. And you mentioned too about how some of the students have hidden gifts and they just need someone to empower them and get them to open up. And I completely agree. Some of the people I grew up with, the more introverted or quiet people, actually ended up becoming something,
Yeah.
completely different than you saw in their childhood. They just needed someone to see them in that way.
Yeah. And sometimes, and it goes back to, how they were raised.
Mm-hmm.
It goes all the way back to that. So even in my household now, with my granddaughter who's 10, I am teaching her how to show up. And I'm pulling things out of her that typically would just go unchecked throughout the day. She's 10 years old, of course. But when I do conferences, she's right next to me. She's watching how I show up as a leader. I model so she learns. So when she goes out in these different spaces, she understands that my voice carries power. So we have to empower the next generation.
Absolutely. Which leadership principle has been the most influential for you and why?
And this is gonna make a whole lot of sense with the whole restorative approach. But for me, the leadership principle that has shaped me the most is leading with empathy.
Yep.
Leading with empathy is one of the things that I hold dearly. I've learned that when you truly listen, truly listen, you genuinely understand people's perspectives and the challenges that they experience. And I talk a lot about this in my book, Circle Up, Let's Talk. It goes all the way back to listening. And I had a conversation with my son yesterday, and he was, we were talking about this whole listening thing, and he said, "Well, you're actually hearing me these days." And I'm like, I'm actually hearing you. And he said, "Yes." I said, when it started, when you were actually in kindergarten, because we played this Pass the Mic. And so it was, "Mom, you could only speak if you're holding the microphone." And I'm like, "Okay, so if I'm holding the microphone and I'm speaking, what are you doing? Listening?" And then you flip that, right? So for me, it's really taking the time to listen to people, creating trust, and understanding that trust is the foundation on which we build resilience. So in my work with students and campus administrators and even in the community, I've seen that people rise to the challenges when they really feel seen and heard. If they don't think you're listening to them, they're not even going to say a word. So leadership for me isn't just about making decisions. It's about creating the environments where everyone feels empowered to do their best, even in the toughest situations. So, for me, the principle that has been most empowering for me or influential is empathy, because it gives me that space to hear people and understand what's going on in their lives in order to help them.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I'm the same way. I think that empathy and accountability are two that
Hmm.
I really hold dear to me because, like you said, when you have that empathetic perspective, people do feel empowered to do their best. And you
Yes.
don't even really have to micromanage them. You don't have to give them certain specific things because when they look up to you as a leader, they naturally just embody that and they find their
Yeah.
purpose. So I love that.
Exactly. And when they know that, they know that you're listening to them. If you go back to even being around, I don't know if you have siblings or just friends, if you go around your friends and when you're not listening to them, sometimes they'll just throw their hands up and walk away. Like you're not listening anyway, so why am I wasting my time having a conversation?
Hmm.
Right? And even in marriages, we have to be careful of that because we also are accountable to how we show up in our homes. And when one partner's not listening, then there's things that's going to go unchecked in your household because you're not listening to me anyway. So I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go here, or I'm going to go there. And so you have to give energy to the space you're in, but you play a
Hmm.
major role.
Absolutely. I agree. And as I've gotten older, I've also noticed that a lot of these behaviors, they all stem from childhood trauma.
They
Every
did.
single one of them. And I've realized that as I've gotten older, when, you see adults acting a certain way, you realize, okay, something happened when you were young.
It's their story. Their story. They're living it out. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, it goes back to, like you're saying, how did adults in your homes show up? How did your teachers show up? How did you show up? Because it's all about the experiences that you've had that help shape who you are. The very first question talked about my story. My story is the reason I'm here. My story is the reason I have a voice because I was around solid women who were leading and serving. And so I'm a true servant leader at heart.
Awesome. I love that. And you've stepped into schools and communities that needed real change. And I wanted to ask where you start, when you're trying to shift a culture.
So when you're shifting a culture, for me, wherever you are, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a home, and I know you mentioned the school and the community, for me, real change, it starts with me listening. A lot of it goes back to listening. I spend time with the students, the teachers, the staff, the families to understand the experiences and challenges that they're having. What's already working? What's already working? So culture isn't something that you just impose. It's something that you have to grow from the inside out. Like you really have to go in and pay attention to what's going on. So once I'm from there, I can actually focus on building trust and relationships because people need to feel valued. You mentioned that earlier before they can embrace the change. No one is going to embrace you or your ideas if they don't trust you. So when we introduce, then I go into introducing small intentional actions that's going to create consistency and accountability. We can celebrate the wins along the way. Celebrating wins doesn't necessarily have to be now we have pushed the scores all the way up. It could just be as simple as no one called out today. That's a huge win. So sometimes we're looking for these graphical or representation and it's just people showing up every day. People are smiling. So over time those intentional it compounds and then the culture begins to shift towards engagement, resilience, and the big one for me is shared purpose. So it's not as easy to shift culture, but you have to be intentional and you have to be able to put the work in, but you have to know your people. You have to
Hmm.
know what you're working with.
Yep. I
Yeah.
completely agree with that because I've been in different environments. I came from a IT background, so I was doing help desk stuff and then I've been in corporate and now I'm on the educational side of things. And I've noticed, when people in education, they all have a shared purpose. They all
Hmm.
want to help kids, to help communities. And I've noticed that in being in the coalition, how much of a difference that makes in the environment, and how much more
Yes.
positive everything is. And just like you mentioned, celebrating the small wins is just so important.
Oh, yes. A lot of times we don't. I was working with a family on the weekend. I was doing some coaching or some mentoring. And there was like a laundry list of things that was going wrong. And my big thing to the parent was, let's work on this one and celebrate. Because it was the deck was so high that this student felt like there's no way I could get to that. I could barely dent this. And I told the parent, I said, man, when he does this, you've got to celebrate. He may not be doing it at 100%, but just the fact that he showed up to engage in that activity, we're going to celebrate that. We're going to clap it up. We're going to snap it up. We're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure this. And you know what? Before you know it, he was on to the next task, which typically takes a good full week. But he was ready to move because he realized that, hey, this is actually making people happy. I feel better. I didn't lie about this situation, so I don't have that guilt,
Hmm.
and it takes a while. It depends on what it is, maybe a week, maybe a month, and maybe 6 months. But we just have to make sure that we're celebrating along the way.
What is something that you think leaders get wrong when they try to fix a system?
One of the biggest mistakes I believe leaders make when they're trying to fix a system is thinking that change can happen without first understanding the people within.
Hmm.
I think that's a big mistake in my opinion. Too often as leaders focus on process without listening to the experiences, the frustration and the insights of boots on the ground, I call it. The people actually on the ground. So it starts with connecting, understanding. Yes, systems are made up of people, and when leaders take the time to build trust and involve others in that solution, is that shared ownership. So now we're addressing the culture as much as the structure. And that's very, very key. Sometimes people don't see them together, but we have to address the culture as much as the structure. The changes are not only more effective, they will actually last when you're looking at those two.
Hmm. I
Yes.
agree. And I think people, they really do need to look at, the culture that's already happening, because the people that they have in their
Hmm.
organization or their community, it's going to impact them when they do have to deal with structural changes. So, yeah, I think that's
Exactly.
a good point.
And you can't look at the structure without looking at the culture, and you can't start changing without understanding the people. So I've seen where that has failed,
Hmm.
just looking at working in different environments where they come in and like, this is what we're doing today, and this is how we're going to do it. But you're not looking at the people that
Yeah.
you need to change that. Do they have the capacity? Do they have the capacity to carry out the tasks that you're asking them to do? Do they have the capacity to embrace this vision? So it has to be shared,
Hmm.
definitely.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of times where I've seen organizations try to make too many changes too quickly, or they bring in a whole team where they're trying to do a complete restructure of everything. You just see it kind of falls apart sometimes if they aren't going about it in the right way and really talking to the people that are working for them.
Exactly. And you have to be able to stay grounded because you're leading through pressure. I mean,
Mhm.
I've been in situations, where it's hard. It's leadership is hard. But when you're looking at pressure and transition, you have to get it right. You have to get it right, or the people are going to be the ones to pay that price.
Mhm. Absolutely. You talk a lot about resilience. So, what does that word look like to you?
So for me, resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's not just about bouncing back. It's about moving forward with purpose. And so, even after setbacks, in my book, Circle Up, Let's Talk, I explore how open, honest conversations and restorative practices actually help students, staff, and the greater community process the challenges that they're experiencing. It helps them to repair the harm and build stronger connections. So, it's not just about bouncing back. Where are we going from here? So, through my leadership experience and community work, I've seen resilience in action. It's the courage. It takes courage to face difficulties, but not
Mhm.
only courage, but also the willingness to learn from them. Sometimes people face these challenges and they keep going. I embrace a challenge because when I tell you I'm coming out stronger, I'm coming out bolder, I'm coming out stronger and more empowered. So for me, just to have these inside of me, I have to project it, I have to give it to somebody else so we can be empowered, right? So just the commitment to keep growing, both individually and collectively, I just talked about, sharing that with someone where we foster the empathy and the accountability and support. Resilience becomes a skill, but we can nurture that, not just a trait we're born with. Because I do believe over time I have developed and grown so much stronger because of the challenges that I've gone through, the pressure that has been applied. I have a thing where I say, I could do hard things. Give it to me, bring it to me. Because it's that pressure. I'm gonna, they talk about diamond and all of this stuff that needs that pressure to be refined. Please bring me some pressure. But again, we tend to shy away from challenges, not realizing that it's actually gonna build us stronger. And it's a natural thing, right? You fight or flight. I'm in it for the fight because I'm gonna win for children. I'm going to win for administrators. I'm going to win for my community, regardless of what's going on. I'm in it to win it. And so that's what it means to me. Keep going.
I love that. I love that perspective. You mentioned having the courage to be resilient. And I think, a lot of what I talk about on my podcast is about turning pain into power or turning pain into purpose. And I think that goes along with resilience because it's really about what you learn when you're going through the difficult things and how you can take what you learned and put it into something better. And that's how you come out stronger too.
Yes, yes, yes. Being able to create that open space, that space where they feel safe to communicate, is going to be powerful because some of these children are not feeling heard. The parents are not feeling heard. The administrators are not feeling heard. The teachers don't feel heard. And so before you know it, no one knows how to practice or even how to model open communication. How do you reflect on something that happened a day ago, a week ago, 2 hours ago? So I think resilience grows when teams know it's safe to take risk, it's safe to make mistakes and learn from them. And leaders could guide this by setting clear expectations, celebrating progress and helping individuals see challenge. There's I do a family vision statement when I do my work with parents in the community. And you go in and you can see the vision statement or the mission statement is a mission statement in different workplaces, right? So I could tell you what the mission statement is in our district and what the mission statement is in your organization. Can a family break that down? They never think about it. And I'm not saying home is a business, but we have to have something that we embrace. So that is something that I developed with the families. Let's create a family mission statement so everybody could own it. But at the end of the day, it's about combining all of these different things together to keep our families stronger, our school community stronger. So for me, when you're talking about building resilience in your team, it's about setting clear expectations, help individuals see opportunities to grow. Where can I fit in? What can I do different? How am I connecting what I'm doing to the mission in the home or in the organization, right? As a team, we have to embrace that. And when that's not happening, we have to bring that back. And I'm saying bring it back to the circle. Let's talk about it. Where did we miss a step? So showing people they're supported while helping them stretch beyond what they think they can handle really is a team approach because it's going to take multiple individuals to get it right.
And you mentioned the family piece as an example, and I completely agree. It may not need to operate as a business per se, but it does need to have some sort of value and purpose holding everything together. And I think that even with children and the parent dynamic, it's up to the parent to build that resilience in their child too. So
Mhm. And I think it's interesting because, again, when we go to work, when we leave the home and we go to work, and in some places you have to know the mission statement. You have to know what it means. How do I fit into this? How is it aligned with what I'm doing every single day? But then you go home and you just do whatever. You know what I mean? So there's no connection. There's no connection. And my kids will say like, okay, here goes the mission statement. Here comes a therapist. Here comes this. They're my children. I love them dearly. But at the end of the day, I'm able to sit back now and just watch how my son parents. He created experiences for his children. He talks about it and he's like, Mom, remember when we did this? We went out, we were working on communication. And I would take him to Applebee's because the kids meal at Applebee's was $4.99, right? We're not eating McDonald's today. Not knocking McDonald's, but we're going into an environment where families are sitting down together and having a nice meal. And they were like, so why are we really here? And so my whole purpose for that was there's a way you behave outside the home, there's a way you behave inside the home. But then we went back home and we aligned it. We went back home and we aligned it, and so now that I see how my son is parenting it is what he saw growing up. It goes back to the very first question, your story. How are you showing up today? So
Mhm.
I really actually just absolutely love this whole piece where we're making these connections.
Absolutely. And I kind of just wanted to go back a little bit back more to the leadership aspect of things when it comes to takeaways for other leaders. What's
Mhm.
something that you wish more leaders were honest about?
That is hard. I wish more leaders would be honest that leadership is hard work. It's not just about rules or numbers, it's about people. It's about admitting when you don't have all the answers, because sometimes we don't, as leaders, have all the answers. Listening and learning alongside the team, that's when the real change happens. And so for me, a lot of leaders, they work so hard they don't share the story. They don't share the going home at night and all you're thinking about is the work. This is what I have to do tomorrow. This one showed up. I'm on the way to work and I had 5 people call out and my secretary is calling me. And literally in my head, I'm working a master schedule in my head. Okay, well, let's move this person here, put this person here, move this person here, put this person here. And then my phone rings and my son ran out of gas. And I'm like, okay, call triple A. Nobody talks about how hard it is when you're balancing all of these things. And then you're looking at scores, academic outcomes. And this one is a lot. It's a lot. And we work under pressure. So for me, something I wish more leaders were honest about is how hard the work is how hard it is. Because it's not easy. It's not
Mhm.
easy at all. But it's very rewarding when you have good systems in place and everything is moving in the right direction. Something is going to come and throw you off course. You get right back up and just
Mhm.
tell yourself, I could do hard things. I could do very, very hard things, but it's hard work. And so
Mhm.
that's the one thing I wish more leaders would share how hard the work is. It's rewarding, very rewarding, but it's also hard work. But it makes you better, right? It makes you better.
I'm a believer that you don't choose leadership; kind of chooses you.
It
It
really
kind of
does.
comes from fire in your heart that you don't really know where it came from, but it kind of just chooses you at the end.
Yeah.
What I enjoy is just being able to help people and make them not feel so alone and make them feel inspired. But there's a lot that comes with it as well.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Honestly, I remember being a secondary principal, which means I was a principal for middle school and high school at the same time. And so I would spend the first half of getting home working on middle school data and looking at how to change my master schedule. And once I'm done with middle school, okay, middle school is good. Let me put this over here. Now let me get everything up for high school and do the same thing from ninth through 12th grade. Graduation is coming up and I have to make sure that the credits are good. And it's so much. And we make it look easy because we don't talk about the hard part, the hard places.
And I think also being in education make that a little bit more difficult sometimes too, because you have the
Mm,
community looking up to you. So it can
mhm.
change on the industry you're in. I mean, I feel like when
Exactly.
you get on TikTok and you see people talking, they can kind of freely just say whatever because their profession is TikTok. So I've noticed a difference there.
Yes.
What's a leadership lesson that cost you something but changed you for the better?
Well, which one? Let me pick one. So, a leadership lesson that cost me came from trusting someone on my team to carry out a task they weren't fully prepared for at all. I assumed, you learn not to assume that their experience in another district meant they could handle it. If you're coming from this position, then obviously you have been exposed to this. And so, hey, this is a task that I'm asking you to do. They cannot handle it. And so it ended up costing me time because I had to step in and redo the work. So if for example you say, "Hey, I would like for you to get this report done. It's due to me in 2 days." I typically do a midpoint check. "Hey, how's it going? Do you need anything from me?" "Oh, I'm good. I'm good." But you've got to see it. I believe in see it, touch it, feel it, right? Or see it, feel it, whatever the case may be. Don't just take someone's word for it that they're working on it and they're good. So it was very frustrating in the moment, but it became a powerful learning opportunity for me. I'm a very reflective person, so it taught me the importance of really truly assessing capacity before delegating, also providing guidance along the way, and making sure that I'm pairing trust with accountability. I've got to be able to trust that you could do the work and I'm going to hold you accountable. So since then, I've been more intentional about matching responsibilities to people's skills while giving them the room to grow. But again, is working alongside people and not just saying, "Hey, how's it going?" I need you to show it to me. Ask questions, and we could have like a little powwow before you start the task so I could hear your thinking. Had I done that before, I would have realized that they were not ready for it. And so it did cost me time, but again, it went back to understanding the importance of assessing capacity before delegating. And so that was a lesson for me, assessing capacity before delegating.
That's a great lesson. And I think that happens to people a lot, especially when they have new hires. They're seeing the resume, they're hearing things, but until they actually get the work, you can't really see what's going on.
Exactly.
So I think it's something that happens to a lot of leaders at some point, and all of the meaning is just to learn from it.
Exactly. And that was a big lesson for me. And I hold that dearly. Assessing capacity before delegating. I've held on to that tight.
How do you stay connected to purpose when things get hard? And I think this is going to be a big one right now just because of everything
Yes.
we're dealing with right now. But I'd
Yes.
love to just hear your
Things
perspective on that.
Yeah, and things do get hard, but I remind myself, first, I could do hard things, but then I have to stay connected with my purpose by reminding myself who I serve. Always keep that in mind. Who am I serving and why I started this work in the first place? So those are, that's something. So for me, it's always about the students, the families, the communities, the campus administrators, the teachers, helping them to grow, helping them to heal, but also, more importantly, helping them to be successful. So when things get hard, I draw on relationships. I'm very reflective. I also hold on to my faith. I can never forget about that. I circle up with my team. I learn, I refocus on the bigger picture. But purpose isn't something that you just achieve. You don't achieve it just once. It's something that you return to every single day, especially when the pressure is on. I have to go back and tell myself, okay, this is the reason I'm here. This is the reason, this is why I'm doing this. And so that focus keeps me grounded. Keeps me resilient and intentional in every decision I make because I have to remember my why. I have to.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier about staying grounded. I'm starting to see some dots connect here. So you have the resilience and being grounded and empathy, they all tie into your purpose. And I think that's really important. And even finding your purpose, what are you passionate about? What makes you feel fulfilled? Do you like to work with people? I think those are all very important things to have. And I can see how they all kind of tie into your purpose as well.
Yes. And it's all service. It's all serving people.
Mm-hmm.
It's all serving people.
Where can listeners follow your work and your books and foundation?
So you can follow my work, or the listeners can follow my work with my foundation on the Myers Gardere International Foundation. You could just Google that online, MyersGardereFoundation.org. Our website has all the programs and the ways to get involved. We do a lot of work globally, locally. So my books, including Circle Up, Let's Talk, which is love that book because you could literally walk away with it and host some circles in your own homes or in your classrooms. They're available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and so many different sites. I actually just had a royalty email from Japan. So I actually sell my books in Japan also.
Amazing.
Once you Google, yes. Yes, I love getting the ones from Japan. I absolutely love it. And so just by Googling my name, Nicola Myers Gardere, it'll pop up all my books. Live Your Abundant Life 2 talks a lot about how I pushed through after divorce, moving forward. And that's a very powerful book. I actually have workbook in English and Spanish that families can use, just to kind of get them through. And again, that's on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. My most recent one, and I do have a couple of the copies here, is Voices United, Autism. It's on autism. And so it's a group of ladies that came together, practitioners that actually share their stories. And one of my favorite ones is one of my friends on the East Coast. She's a therapist. And she shared about the smash up activity when you're working with kids and dealing with the brain, the science of the brain. And all of those books are on Amazon, definitely, and Barnes and Nobles. So, any updates, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Facebook, and it's under my name, Nicola Myers, or maybe it's flipped Myers Nicola, but you can find me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicola. And I'll be sure to put those links
Yeah.
to everything in the description. But I really appreciate you coming on to talk with me today. You shared a lot of very valuable leadership lessons that I know our listeners are going to benefit from. And I appreciate having you as such a positive role model in my life. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was beautiful. And again, we can do hard things as leaders because we're going to face some challenges. But how do you come out of it stronger, more empowered? And you deposit that same thing into the individuals around you. Make sure they come out more empowered and ready to keep going. So I'm in it to win it. That's my thing. Thank you so much.